Welcome to the Chronicles of a Cheating Wife channel. A new story every day. Don't forget to subscribe. I woke up with the strangest feeling that I wasn't alone. My eyes opened in the half-light before dawn, and for a moment I lay there, barely breathing, convinced I felt someone else's presence. Not Amelia, my wife, because she was fast asleep next to me. This was something else, an odd awareness, like another soul lurking in the darkness. I remained still, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner. My heart throbbed, but I kept quiet. Time is a cunning enemy. It moves stealthily, the seconds forming days, months, years, until you suddenly realize you don't know the person next to you anymore. My father once told me that a man's biggest war is with his own illusions of permanence. And in that sleepy moment before dawn, I understood exactly what he meant. I was no longer the man I thought I was. That knowledge floated around me, sharp as broken glass, and I knew my life had changed, though I couldn't yet name why or how. I turned my head and looked at Amelia's outline in the darkness. She was curled up under the blanket, hair fanning across the pillow. There was a time, maybe last year or the year before, when just watching her sleep filled me with a sense of calm. Now, all I felt was a coldness expanding in my stomach. My mouth was dry, and something in my chest felt tight, because I knew what I knew, or at least I suspected enough to keep me awake and haunted. Quietly, I slipped out of bed. The wooden floor was cool beneath my feet. I wandered into the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the light. The mirror caught my reflection. A man of 35, short cropped hair, faint lines under the eyes, the beginnings of stubble on his jaw. I'm an architect, a decent one, with a respectable position at a firm in Boston. Husband to Amelia, father to a boy, not yet a year old. And yet, looking in that mirror, I could hardly recognize myself. The man staring back was hollowed out, as if someone had taken a scoop out of his core. I should have suspected something months ago. Maybe I did. Work had me pinned down. Deadlines were a constant drumbeat in my head. But my instincts had started nudging me around the time Amelia gave birth to our son. There'd been small shifts in her attitude, subtle changes in her routine. There was that day she came back from a marketing conference with a brand new watch, expensive, definitely not a freebie from a vendor. I'd asked politely where she got it, and she said some vague nonsense about a raffle, then changed the topic. The next morning, I found the watch receipt in the trash can, with a man's name on the credit card statement, Michael Holden. I told myself it was probably a simple mistake, maybe a coworker's oversight, and I forced the matter out of my head. But the feeling, this sense of not being alone, not being secure, never left me. I splashed water on my face. Amelia was asleep in the next room, oblivious. Meanwhile, the knowledge of her betrayal sat there in my chest, like a slow poison. I wanted to confront her. Instead, I watched the water drip down my chin, and I thought about time again. 5 years of marriage, all those days that we'd shared, gradually building something I thought was unbreakable. All it took was one crack, one small deception. Now I could see the entire foundation crumbling, and I felt powerless to stop it. When I walked back into the bedroom, I lingered in the doorway. The baby was in the nursery, but sometimes we kept his bassinet near the bed when he had trouble sleeping. That night, he was in the other room. Amelia had insisted on it, said she needed rest. She'd been especially stressed lately. And I, too exhausted to argue, obliged. I looked at her shape in the darkness and imagined what she might be dreaming. Did she dream of him, the man who bought her that watch? I went to the window and opened it a crack. The city's early morning hush drifted in, the streetlights still shining on empty sidewalks. I let the cool air soothe me, though my heart kept pounding. I wanted to believe I was just paranoid. But deep down, I already knew that her loyalty was gone. I already knew that I'd been replaced. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. An alarm I'd set for an early meeting. I turned it off, not wanting to wake her. Then I stood there, swallowing the bitterness in my throat, feeling it burn all the way down. Eventually, I climbed back under the sheets, closed my eyes, and counted my breaths until the light of morning arrived. When Amelia finally stirred at sunrise, I pretended to be half asleep, so I wouldn't have to look her in the face. She rolled over and rested her hand on my shoulder, and a jolt of revulsion shot through me, even as I forced my body to remain still. She whispered, "Good morning," and I mumbled some incoherent reply. If she suspected something was off, she didn't show it. She got up, wrapped a robe around herself, and walked out, presumably to see our son or start her day. I stayed in bed, counting the cracks in the ceiling. Time was ticking, and I hated it for that. Eventually, I dragged myself into the shower, letting the water run hot. My mind wandered back to the day our son was born. I'd been there, of course, standing by the wall in that tiny hospital room, listening to her cries as the contractions peaked. My fingers dug into my palms so hard I left marks. I had never felt so helpless and hopeful at once. When our baby finally emerged, the nurse placed him on Amelia's chest. She was sweating, exhausted. I thought I saw tears of joy in her eyes. Then she picked up her phone and opened a video, some clip that started playing in the background. I remember hearing a child's voice, but that wasn't what made my head snap up. It was the low male whisper that followed, the voice so close, so intimate. Again, the voice said, throaty, almost cocky, "One more time." Even now, remembering it made my gut clench. In that moment, I was too overwhelmed to process. I only noticed that Amelia looked stricken. Her face went pale, and she tapped the screen frantically to shut it off. She managed a shaky laugh, muttering something about a random ad that popped up. My brain was spinning, but I didn't question it then. The birth overshadowed everything else. Looking back, I wonder if that was the exact moment the fracture began. I dressed in silence, pulling on my usual shirt and tie. As an architect in a reputable firm, I'm expected to look polished. But I stared at myself in the mirror and felt like a performer in the wrong costume. My mind kept drifting to that hospital moment, the confusion on her face. It had all seemed so innocuous then. Now it felt like a giant signpost I'd willfully ignored. Downstairs, the smell of coffee called me. Amelia was at the table, feeding our boy from a small spoon. She looked up as I entered the room, and I watched her carefully. Her dark blonde hair was tied in a loose bun, and she wore a simple t-shirt with leggings. Nothing outwardly suspicious. She didn't act guilty. If anything, she acted normal, which somehow made it all worse. I offered her a tight smile and kissed our son on the forehead. He made a small cooing sound, and for a moment, my heart softened. This was my family. Despite everything, I loved my boy more than my own life. Amelia gestured to the coffee pot. "Freshly brewed," she said. "You've got time to sit." I considered her question. My schedule was packed, but a part of me wanted to read her body language, see if I could find a hint of duplicity. So I nodded and poured a mug, taking the seat across from her. She resumed feeding the baby, occasionally wiping his mouth with a bib. I studied her every move, her posture, her eyes. And I couldn't help but recall the text messages I had discovered a month ago, the ones I'd found on her phone by accident. The texts were short but intimate in a way that made my blood chill. "Miss your hands. You felt so good last time. Can't wait to see you again." She never addressed the sender by name in those messages, but I knew it was the same man from that watch receipt. Michael, she told me once, that time was her greatest enemy. That she felt it pressing down on her, stealing her youth, her potential. I suppose she tried to outrun it by chasing new thrills. Meanwhile, for me, time was a steady friend, until it turned and bit me when I wasn't looking. As I sipped my coffee, I felt that silent war playing out between us, my need for security, her hunger for excitement. And in that quiet tension, I realized how deeply separated we have become. When Amelia spoke, it startled me. "You seem quiet today," she said, arching an eyebrow. I forced a shrug. Not much to say. Got a busy day ahead. She paused, eyes flicking over my face. Everything okay? Fine. I lied. Let's not get into it before work. She nodded slowly, and for half a second, I thought I saw relief in her expression. Like she was glad I wasn't digging deeper. I downed the rest of my coffee in 3 swallows and set the mug aside. Then I kissed my son again, inhaling his sweet baby smell, and left for the office. At work, my assistant asked if I was feeling all right. "You look pale," she said, handing me a stack of architectural drafts. I lied again, told her I was just tired, that having a newborn at home was a challenge. That excuse used to be enough. But it felt hollow now. The day crawled by. Each hour a new agony of half-focused tasks. I was designing a modern office tower for a client near the waterfront, and my mind should have been on those details. Foundation materials, eco-friendly glass, load-bearing beams. Instead, I replayed every suspicious moment I'd had with Amelia in the past year. Every sign I'd brushed off. My heart hammered in my chest. My breathing went shallow. Several times, I had to pause and pull myself back to the present. Shortly after lunch, I got a text from an unknown number. I unlocked my phone and read it. "Greater than Joshua, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you this. You don't deserve the lies. She's seeing someone else. I can't keep quiet anymore." No name, no explanation. My throat clenched, my hands turned clammy. I stared at the words, read them again, and my suspicion hardened into certainty. I typed back, "Who is this?" No immediate response. I stared, waiting for those little dots, but there was nothing. That was it. A bomb dropped into my day. When I tried calling the number, it went straight to voicemail. The rest of the day was a blur. I worked mechanically, nodding through client calls, sketching a proposed facade, my thoughts miles away. By evening, I was drained. I told my colleagues I needed to leave early. They didn't question it. I returned home to find Amelia absent. She'd left a note saying she had a late meeting with her startup colleagues. The irony of it made me want to smash something. It was either a real meeting, or just one more cover for her affair. The baby was with the babysitter, an older lady we'd hired to help. I could hear him fussing softly upstairs. I thanked her, paid her, and she left. Then I climbed up, took the baby from his crib, and held him close. He squirmed, then relaxed, trusting me completely. It was the only genuine comfort I'd had all day. Eventually, I put him back to bed, singing an off-key lullaby. My voice cracked more than once, but he didn't mind. He drifted off, tiny hand curled around my finger. I stood there in the dim glow of the nightlight, tears stinging my eyes. I was so afraid of losing my family. But the truth was, I'd already lost the illusion of unity. Downstairs, I paced the living room, staring at my phone. I wanted to confront Amelia the moment she walked in, demand every detail. But I knew I'd only get half answers, denials, or perhaps tears that might weaken my resolve. I decided to wait. With an odd sense of numb determination, I pulled out a small leather notebook from a drawer. I used to jot down architectural ideas in it, but lately, it had become my repository of evidence. I wrote down the unknown number's text. I wrote down the times she'd come home late, the watch receipt, the phone video after childbirth, the suspicious messages. By the time I finished, my hand trembled. Amelia returned close to midnight. I heard the key in the lock, the rustle of her coat. She stepped inside to find me sitting on the couch, arms folded. Her eyes flickered with surprise. "You're still up?" I nodded, forcing an even tone. "How was the meeting?" She shrugged, taking off her shoes. "Fine. Ran longer than expected." Then she peered at me. "Are you okay? You look tense." I felt my voice tighten. "I had a strange day." She lowered her gaze. "Work trouble?" I let out a breath. Yes and no. I stood and walked over to her. She smelled of perfume, something heavier than her usual floral scent. I touched the collar of her jacket lightly. "Who were you with?" Her lips parted, confusion or maybe alarm in her eyes. "My team," she answered, too quickly. I didn't press further. I just stared at her, silent, until she looked away. Eventually, she mumbled something about being exhausted and headed upstairs. I let her go. I wasn't ready for the fight yet. Time, the enemy, was still marching, and I needed more proof. I needed the truth in plain sight. I found it sooner than I expected. A few days later, I was working from home, finishing a design concept on my laptop while the baby napped. Amelia was out again, allegedly meeting a colleague for coffee. I'd spent the day feeling my anger coil like a spring inside me, and I was on the brink of calling her. But then my phone buzzed with a notification from our shared cloud service. Amelia had inadvertently synced some videos there, forgetting to disable auto-upload. I clicked out of curiosity, and I saw a thumbnail that made my blood freeze. It was a short clip, a bedroom setting. The curtains were half drawn, the lighting dim. Amelia's bare shoulder was in the foreground, and there was a man's voice in the background, whispering. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked the video, swallowing the sick feeling in my gut. The images that played were brief, but unmistakable. Amelia was on a bed with a man I recognized from a single photograph she'd once shown me of her coworker. She'd lied. That face, that confident smirk, it had to be Michael. They were tangled in sheets, her skin pressed to his. The camera shook, then the video ended. She must have recorded it accidentally, or maybe intentionally. I don't know. But seeing it was like a spear through my chest. My hand tightened around the phone. I could hear my own heartbeat, a low roar in my ears. My first instinct was to scream, to throw the device at the wall. Instead, I sat very still, watching it a second time, swallowing a wave of nausea. There was no more room for denial. She was with him, naked, satisfied. He whispered things in her ear, a single sentence escaping clearly, "You're mine tonight." And she moaned a response that I couldn't fully make out, but it was enough. Enough to confirm that everything I suspected was real. I closed the video, locked my phone, and stared out the window. My reflection caught in the glass, a man who had just seen the proof that his wife had replaced him. Slowly, methodically, I forwarded the file to my personal email, then to a private cloud. Next, I compiled every text, every suspicious clue I had. I added them to a folder labeled Truth. It felt obscene, but also necessary, like I was dissecting my own heartbreak under a microscope. The baby fussed upstairs, probably awakened by some stirring. I forced myself to stand and go to him. In the nursery, I lifted my son, cradling him against my shoulder. He quieted down, comforted by the warmth of my body. I rocked him gently, pressing my face into his soft hair. He smelled of powder and new beginnings. It was so unfair that his mother was out chasing cheap thrills. I wanted to shield him from all of this, but there was no real shield from the truth. Later that evening, Amelia came home smiling. She carried a shopping bag and started talking about some new marketing initiative. I looked at her, searching her face for guilt. She seemed radiant, almost glowing. That only made the knife twist deeper in my gut. I waited until she was done, then told her calmly I had to go out, that I needed to clear my head. She opened her mouth to protest, but I turned away and left without letting her finish. She could sense the tension, but not enough to chase me. I drove aimlessly for an hour before pulling into a deserted park on the outskirts of the city. The sky was bruised with purple clouds, the streetlights flickering across the empty lot. I parked beneath a gnarled oak tree, turned off the engine, and stared at the night. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. The memory of that video replayed in my mind, each frame a fresh wound. I heard her voice, the breathy moan she made. I pounded the steering wheel once, letting out a ragged breath. I wanted to rage. I wanted to drive back and scream at her until my throat was raw. But that wasn't how I was built. My anger was like ice, settling into every cell. I flicked on my phone, checking the folder labeled Truth. It was a dark comfort. Evidence of betrayal, plain and indisputable. In that moment, I decided I would not lose my composure. I would approach this like a surgeon, calmly dissecting each piece of the lie until I laid bare everything rotten beneath. Time, the enemy, was still ticking, but I was no longer helpless. I had a plan. The next day, I pretended everything was normal. I went to the office, attended meetings, and told Amelia I might be home late. She didn't question it. Perhaps she assumed I'd do what I always did, throw myself into work. Instead, I drove to a small stationery store and bought a cheap notebook and a pen. It reminded me of the basic tools I used in college to sketch my earliest design concepts. This time, though, I used it to outline what I would do with all the evidence I'd gathered. It was like drafting a blueprint for my own emotional demolition. That evening, I set up a private email chain to my closest friends. Not many, just the handful I trusted. I attached all the photos, texts, and the video. A single subject line: what you never knew about me and her. No hysteria, no pleas for sympathy, just the cold, hard facts. Then I hit send. Within the hour, my phone blew up with messages from those same friends. Shock, disbelief, half-coherent attempts to comfort me. I read them all in silence, ignoring the calls. Eventually, I texted back a single line. I'm fine. I just wanted you to know the truth. Late that night, after Amelia had gone to bed, I sat in the living room, the house dark except for a lamp at my elbow. I opened that cheap notebook and began sketching. The shape of our home, the layout of rooms, the stairs, the nursery, every window and door. With each stroke of the pencil, I erased her presence from the design. I removed the memory of her laughter in the kitchen, the echo of her footsteps in the hall. In my sketch, she simply did not exist. It felt cathartic, strange, but liberating. I was metaphorically redesigning my life without her. I didn't sleep that night. My mind churned with 1,000 swirling thoughts. By the time morning light filtered through the curtains, I had made my decision. I wouldn't speak her name again. I'd refer to her as the mother of my son, or the woman I lived with. That was it. She'd lost the right to have a place in my language, even if she still occupied the same home. I was methodical about it, forcing myself to bury any remaining warmth or affection. The confrontation happened 2 days later. I came home early from the office, a feeling in my gut that tonight had to be the night I faced her with the cold truth. When I entered the house, I heard hushed voices from the living room. Amelia's voice, pitched high, and another voice, male, calmer but urgent. My heart slammed against my ribs. He was here, in my house. I stepped forward, glancing around the corner. Sure enough, there they were. Amelia stood near the couch, arms folded, while Michael, tall, well-dressed, spoke to her in low tones. They hadn't noticed me yet. I saw the tension in his face, the flicker of fear. He must have realized that being here was a risk. My hand tightened on the strap of my briefcase. If I had been a different kind of man, maybe I would have exploded into violence. But all I felt was a cold calm. I stepped into the room. They both froze, turning to me. Amelia's eyes widened, and she blurted, "Joshua, this isn't what it looks like." I cut her off, voice level. "It's exactly what it looks like." Michael swallowed, glancing at Amelia, then back at me. He tried for a polite nod. "We were just—" "Shut up," I said quietly. My voice must have held a certain edge, because he clamped his mouth shut. Amelia made a small strangled sound in her throat. Her eyes darted to me, then to him. She took a step forward, hands raised in a half-pleading gesture. "Listen, this is complicated. I can explain." "Explain." I echoed. I set my briefcase down with care, as though it were full of fragile glass. I cleared my throat. "I saw the video. I know everything." Michael winced, clearly rattled that I discovered their affair. Amelia's face drained of color. She tried again. Her voice faltered. She couldn't say sorry, or maybe she realized how pointless it would be. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I want you both out of here. Right now. She stared, confused. But this is my house too. That can be sorted out later, I said with a curt nod. You, him, get out. My heart was pounding. But outwardly, I was as calm as ice. Michael exchanged a look with Amelia, and he murmured, "We should go." Something in me twinged at the possessive way he placed a hand on her elbow. But I just watched them walk to the door. Amelia paused, turning back, tears brimming in her eyes. She opened her mouth, perhaps to beg or to explain. I gave a small shake of my head, meeting her gaze with cool detachment. The message was clear. I don't want to hear it. She swallowed and followed him out. The door clicked shut. Only then did I release a shuddering breath. My hands trembled, and my knees felt weak. I stumbled to the nearest chair and sank into it. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I had done it, thrown her out, along with her lover. My wife, the mother of my son, had walked out the door with another man. Even though I knew it was the right decision, my stomach clenched in anguish. The finality of it was suffocating. Time, that old enemy, continued ticking. I glanced at the clock on the wall. She had been gone less than 5 minutes, and already the silence was deafening. Slowly, I rose and went upstairs to check on my son. He was asleep in his crib, warm and safe, with no idea of the storm that had just passed. I leaned over and touched his small hand, tears blurring my vision. I felt both numb and raw. The next few days were excruciating. I contacted a lawyer, explained the situation. I sent formal communication to Amelia, letting her know I intended to keep the house for the sake of our son. She replied with anxious texts, calls, voicemails. I ignored them all. My voicemail was full of her pleas. "We need to talk. Joshua, please, don't do this. Let's figure out a solution." But there was nothing to figure out. She had made her choice long before I learned the truth. I told my parents a sanitized version of what happened. They were stunned, but supportive, offering to help with anything I needed. Word spread among our friends. Some voiced shock. Some were suspiciously quiet, which told me they had known more than they let on. That part cut like a knife. Realizing that some of them had guessed or even witnessed her betrayal in subtle ways and never told me, it was another betrayal altogether. One afternoon, I was feeding my son in the high chair when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Amelia standing on the porch, eyes rimmed with red. She wore a simple dress, hair messy, and clutched a small suitcase. My heart beat faster, but I stood firm in the doorway. Her voice wavered. "Can I please come in? Just to talk." I glanced back at my boy, who was babbling as if nothing was wrong. Then I looked at her. "Why?" She swallowed, tears threatening to spill. "Because I'm sorry. I screwed up. And I miss him. I miss you. We have a son, Joshua. We can't just—" I cut her off gently, my voice devoid of warmth. "I don't want you here." She gasped, tears slipping free. "We're still married." "That piece of paper means nothing now," I said. My voice threatened to shake, so I clenched my jaw. "I've seen what you did with him. I know how long it's been going on. There's no fixing that." She took a shaky breath. "He doesn't mean anything to me." It was just. I felt so lonely, so— "Stop," I whispered, swallowing hard. "You betrayed me. You replaced me." Her voice cracked. "I never wanted to replace you. I felt like we were stuck. You were always working. I needed something to feel alive again." I stared at her. "So you shattered our marriage. For a cheap thrill. That's how you chose to feel alive." A tremor went through her. "Please let me make it right." I could barely force out the words. "It's too late for that." She began to sob, voice rising in desperation. "Joshua, we have a child. He'll stay with me," I replied flatly. We can discuss legal arrangements, but you don't get to break me and then come back like nothing happened." She started to respond, but her voice caught in her throat, turning into a choked sob. Slowly, she set down the suitcase. "I understand you're hurt, but we can't just throw away our life. We have time to fix this." "Time," I said, bitter laughter escaping me. "Time is what destroyed us. We let it slip by, lost ourselves in routine. If you really wanted to fix this, you wouldn't have looked for someone else. So no, we don't have time. We're out of it." She trembled, tears streaming. My baby's cries from inside signaled he'd picked up on the tension. For a moment, I thought about letting her in just to calm him. Then I remembered the video of her with Michael, the text messages, and I shut the door. I heard her muffled sob outside, and I just leaned against the wood, eyes closed, feeling an echo of her pain, but not enough to undo my decision. Time passed in a blur of legal documents and nights spent trying to soothe my son's confusion. He probably felt the absence of his mother, though at his age, it was more a subtle change in routine. Meanwhile, I discovered that my focus on work sharpened like a knife. I poured myself into new architectural designs, staying at the office long hours. The numbness helped. My colleagues gave me space, noticing the tension in my face, the new lines bracketing my mouth. Occasionally, Amelia tried to see our son, if only for an hour or two, supervised. I never spoke much during those visits, never addressed her by name, never let her get close. She would try to start a conversation, but I'd keep my responses clipped. The baby would cling to her a bit, uncertain why she was gone, but too young to demand explanations. I would watch them, coldly analyzing the scene. She'd look up at me with a mixture of sorrow and longing, but I offered nothing in return. Eventually, she'd leave, tears shining in her eyes. Michael tried calling me once. His number showed up on my screen. I declined the call. He sent me a text. "I'm sorry. Let me explain." I blocked the number. There was nothing he could say that would heal the wound he helped create. At nights, after the baby slept, I drew in my cheap notebook, recreating the rooms of my life in pencil. Each time, I erased her figure from the space. It became a strange ritual, an exorcism of sorts, erasing her laughter, her touch, her smell. I realized each stroke of the eraser was an act of vengeance, not the dramatic violence or public humiliation some men might crave, but a slow, methodical extraction. With each page, I felt lighter, more certain of my solitude. The final blow, the moment of ultimate catharsis, came when the divorce was finalized. We opted for a settlement that favored me having primary custody. She didn't have the resources to fight a drawn-out battle, nor, it seemed, the stamina. The day the papers were signed, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, my breath shaky. Then I opened my phone and posted the final message to that same small group of friends who'd witnessed my initial heartbreak. I wrote, "It's done. Now you know who I am without her." Their responses trickled in. "Proud of you. Stay strong. Can't believe it happened this way." But I barely absorbed the words. My mind was drifting, remembering Amelia's face when she realized there was no going back. She had inflicted a mortal wound on our marriage the day she let Michael enter her life and her bed. Now, all that was left was the cold aftermath. I drove home and scooped my son into my arms. He was all that mattered now. I made him a promise, whispered into the soft fuzz of his hair. "I'm here for you, no matter what." My voice shook, and tears threatened again. But I kissed his forehead and placed him in his crib for a nap. Then I went to my workspace, rummaged through old sketches, old dreams. Once upon a time, Amelia and I planned to design our own house somewhere quiet, maybe near water. We had the rough sketches pinned on a board for months. I remember her excitement as we talked about a bright future. But those sketches were worthless now, relics of a lie. Gathering them all, papers, pictures, notes, I walked outside to the metal trash bin. The breeze carried a faint chill, like the changing of seasons. Methodically, I set the pile on fire, watching the edges curl and blacken. The smoke rose, carrying whatever illusions I'd once clung to, dispersing them into the sky. And in that moment, with the flames dancing before me, I felt an odd sense of peace. My revenge was not loud or violent. It was simply refusing to let her or him occupy my life any longer. That night, I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now. I felt the space around me, aware of how empty it was without her, how quiet. I gazed at my reflection in the mirror, a man stripped bare of illusions, a man who discovered the painful truth. Time had slipped by, stealing what he thought was real. But in that vacuum, I sensed a new identity forming, raw but determined. I no longer knew who I was in the context of being Amelia's husband, but perhaps that was the point. I could become something else, someone stronger, someone who didn't cower in the face of betrayal. Closing my eyes, I recalled the moment in the hospital when our son was laid on Amelia's chest. The joy in that instant was pure, even if it was overshadowed by betrayal. That child was the only untainted bond between us. My voice caught as I spoke to my reflection. She's gone. She doesn't define you anymore. Saying it felt like stepping off a cliff, but also like a release. I crawled into bed, pulling the blankets over me. The silence was deafening, but the tension in my chest was gone. Instead, a dull ache throbbed there. Grief, yes, but also resolve. I thought again about the text from that anonymous number, the one that finally exposed her lies. You don't deserve the lies. No, I didn't. But I had endured them, dissected them, and survived. I reminded myself that time, which had been my enemy, might now be my ally. Healing might be slow, but it would come. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep, exhausted by the emotional toll. And for the first time in what felt like months, I slept without visions of Amelia in someone else's arms. I dreamed of open, unfinished spaces, blank walls, wide windows, a chance to start over. In that dream, I walked through a house I was building from scratch, every line of it shaped by my hand, every beam secure, no cracks in the foundation. It was quiet, stable, waiting to be filled with something real. When I woke the next morning, I didn't feel that sense of a hidden presence anymore. The bed was empty, but it didn't scare me. I rose, went to the nursery, and scooped up my son, who beamed his toothless smile. In that small face, I saw all the reason I needed to keep going. I realized then that maybe I didn't need to hate her or spend my life punishing her. The real revenge had already taken place in my heart, the moment I decided to erase her from my future. She was now just a stranger, the mother of my son, nothing more. Time will continue to move, but I'll be moving with it, not against it. I may never fully trust again, but I will live. And each day, I'll take measured steps forward, like the quiet, methodical stride of a surgeon, reclaiming the space of my life inch by inch, breath by breath. That's how the old me died, and the new me was born. One day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time. Under that same roof, but without her shadow in it, and in the silence that followed, I finally heard my own heartbeat again.